Enthusiasm is high for Scott Frost, so that means more NIL dollars.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For the first word from the last word on sports, as always, is my guy, Andrew Glukov. Let's jump right in. Andrew, NIL support is booming for Scott Frost. People are excited, at least the people with the money are. I want to talk about what it means that the dollars are starting to flow with Scott Frost's hire as head coach back at UCF.
Well, as we've talked about, this was a fan base that was creeping towards apathy at the end of the Gus Malzahn regime. Something had to give, and while I think enthusiasm would have come from a number of different candidates out there, because looking back at the success he's had in 2017, Scott Frost really lit a fire underneath a lot of these fans. There's money out there. People forget this is a young alum, core. The average age of the UCF alumni as a whole, dating all the way back to the beginning, is under 40. So this is a very young group that is still building that generational fan base. The money is not there compared to an Ohio State or anything like of that ilk, but there's money out there, and you just have to light a fire underneath it. And this has helped. You're seeing a lot of more new donors to what they call the Shareholder Society at UCF, which is a booster, or kind of a booster club for larger scale boosters. Then the kingdom is buzzing, and not to mention the fact that they've already announced that they're going to absorb the kingdom next year. Once everything is finalized in the House settlement, right now that case is under a preliminary settlement, so it's not finalized. But UCF's already making moves, and they're planning on bringing this in house, which is, in my opinion, the right thing to do. There's a lot more work that has to be done with that, but in the meantime, you're in the honeymoon phase. You just hired the new head coach who has a lot of buzz within the Orlando community. Everyone's excited. Even the Orlando Sentinel, Mike Bianchi's excited. I read his article buzzing about how Scott Frost has returned home. While he's from Nebraska, his heart's in Orlando, and it looks like he wants to stay for a long time. That kind of community buzz can only create so much, though. Eventually, you're going to have to translate that to the field. And as we've talked before, Frost did a really good job of tempering those expectations of, hey, we're not going to go undefeated. That's why I said, my floor is 6-6. This team, even though most of the starters have left between the portal or graduation, there's only a handful of starters left. Look at it. There's like 6 or 7 starters left on out of 22, which is that's tough. But as you've said, you can flip a roster really quick in the portal era, and they're already starting to do so. And I know we'll talk about that later today.
Yeah, I go back to what we talked about yesterday in the quote that he had about when stopping when you're happy, and he was happy at UCF, and UCF fans were happy when he was here because things were going great. And I think that this was a really, really good decision to bring him back, because when you can spark enthusiasm so quickly after a hire and the dollars start to flow, that's a really good start. And in today's college football, because the dollars mean so much to recruiting, I'm dealing with this. I had this, before we started recording, I told you I was sitting with athletes today talking about NIL and talking about dollars that they get, and how that affects how they see which program they're going to play for. I think that this is such a great thing that they're able to build on the dollar so quickly after hiring Scott Frost. So with the reorganization of the collective. And you reported on this quite a bit since we started doing this show, and the opportunity that the university has to have more control over the flow of those dollars. You've got your guy in Scott Frost, and I think that UCF probably stands to capitalize. They seem ahead of the curve when it comes to reorganization and using NIL dollars more effectively than maybe some of the other teams in the Big 12.
Well, definitely some over ones that are, reloading with new coaching staffs. In the scheme of things, UCF still very much behind. This is a program that doesn't have a lot of history. They don't have that generational fan base that a West Virginia would have, or even a Baylor. Obviously Baylor's success is a lot more modern, but I mean, that's still, there's generational fans there. UCF doesn't have that. They only started as a university in 1963. And didn't even have their first set of classes until a little bit later than that. Football program didn't start until 79, and then in 96 was when they went to Division 1A, now FBS. So there's not a lot of history there, but it also speaks a different story. And I mentioned this in our last show, talking about being a part of history versus writing history. And that's part of the culture of UCF, a newer university in the grand scheme of things, because you look at all the other, power conference schools outside of Houston, which was, in the early 1900s, or a little bit later. UCF is like a baby compared to all these guys. University of Florida has over 100-year head start. So, to get that generational money in there takes time. So you have to find other avenues. And during the Gus Malzahn era, I thought UCF actually did some creative things to try to, separate themselves from everybody else. And this is before they moved to the Big 12, where they didn't have to do this as much. But the innovation with the spring game and what they did with the social media and the QR codes to help promote the NIL brands, as they were, still in that very infant stage when it was actually a person's brand, not just throwing money for pay for play. UCF was one of those pioneering schools, and I think that mentality doesn't change with Frost. I just think the amount of dollars they're going to have at their disposal to bring in talent is going to improve.
Well, look, NIL is important, but so is the portal, and the portal is open. UCF has brought in a commitment from the portal. We're going to talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. Guys, it's that time of year, Andrew. It's the college football playoff, and it's back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup. The Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. That's the college football playoff. UCF brought in Brandon Jacob from the portal, safety from Maryland. Tell us about Mr. Jacob, Andrew.
Well, he's one of two guys that they brought in so far. He's a 4-star player from Maryland. He's a local. He's a Orlando local. Was very good at track in high school, and you can pitch the story of RJ Harvey, who was a quarterback at Virginia from Orlando, who came home, became a hometown hero, and has just been named third-team AP All-American. So you can sell that success story. And Brandon Jacob is just the next guy who, got to go somewhere else, realize, I miss home. I miss the fact that my parents could come watch me play every home game. So, there's a great opportunity at UCF, and he took advantage of it. So he's the first of what's going to be many transfers in, because UCF has a lot of players to replace. I believe they've got 22 players in the portal at this point. So there's a lot of work to be done. They only signed 13 in the December signing period. They're going to try and get a couple more in February, but they're going to be very portal heavy. And again, as Scott Frost said, is another part of his press conference is we're going to work with the guys that we have. So he's going to, instead of you guys are going to fit my offense, it's going to be my offense is going to fit the guys I have. And so I think you're going to see an evolution of the offense over the next couple seasons as he works with who he has, and then he's bringing in the talent that he wants. It's definitely a process.
Yeah, look, Brandon Jacobs is going to be a building block recruit, I think, from the portal here for UCF. He was Maryland's #1 recruit in the last recruiting cycle, I believe. So he comes in still pretty highly regarded, but is making this move, like you said, maybe to get a little closer to home. But player development is something that I want to talk about that you mentioned there. And I think that is a thing that was lacking maybe a little bit at UCF. We weren't seeing guys really develop widely at a high level at UCF. So underperforming talent, versus, where they should have been is something that I think that Scott Frost excelled at in his first go around at UCF.
Yeah, it's like you said before, Gus Malzahn struggled with quarterback development. That was certainly a thing at UCF. It was always kind of, throw a guy in there and just, hope for the best. But none of them really developed. The closest guy you got with development is Dylan Rizk, who went from, fourth string guy who was just unsure of himself to
unreal story
to starter. Just an unreal story. Whether he starts next season is still up in the air, because as we're going to talk in the next section, quarterback is still something that UCF needs help with, and they're looking. But in the defensive backfield, you actually had some decent success there with the Henderson brothers, Damari and Jakari. BJ Adams, Mac McWilliams. They had a number of guys who had decent runs. Now it's not like blow out the doors NFL development, but I mean it's still very, very positive. I can see some of these guys when they graduate, getting undrafted free agents, tryouts and stuff, and at least make their way there. But as you said, a lot of this was the portal plug and play, and just let's just grab a guy who's a graduate, with 1 year of eligibility left, and just use him. But the freshman to senior development isn't really there.
Yeah, look, you've got some guys leaving here. Lee Hunter is getting into the portal. Marcellus Marshall is leaving in the portal. It looks like you had
Randy
Chase
Pittman as well.
Yeah. Byron Threats has gotten in the portal. He hasn't found a home yet. There's a number of guys that are going to be looking for new homes. Now, I think Lee Hunter will probably land on his feet. Super talented kid, started at Auburn, followed Gus down to UCF. But if you're Scott Frost, how important is the portal to this rebuild, do you think? Is it build it from high school? I mean, we're calling this a rebuild. We've been calling this a rebuild since we started covering this. But, is it a slow build from high school, or are you leaning a little bit heavier on the portal?
You have to lean on the portal. You have to, because the portal giveth and the portal taketh away, and you've had the taketh away. You have 22 guys out there. You have to replenish, and you have to replenish fast. And the high school recruiting, you've missed the December window. A lot of that good talent's already gone. So you've got to be heavy on the portal this year with a focus on, more high school recruiting, and you got to taper it. So you got to go high on the portal, low on the high school, and you got to, bring it towards an equilibrium. And you can do that over the next 2-3 years. But there's no reason why you can't bring in a number of talented players that maybe have 1 or 2 years of eligibility left and get a 6-6 record out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, QB play is going to be the next thing that they're going to be looking at here. Do they need a QB from the portal? We're going to talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Visit fanduel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. As we mentioned in our previous ad read, the playoffs are this weekend. And whether you're betting on SMU or Clemson or Tennessee or whoever, do it with our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You're guaranteed $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. This episode of Locks On UCF is also brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Pick has made daily fantasy accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000x your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's +1 daily fantasy sports app. Join now this holiday season. Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30 million+ in rewards during Prize Picks. Look, download the app and use code Locked On College to get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Look, this is a great game. I play Prize Picks. I love Prize Picks. It's easy to use, Andrew. And again, use code Locked On College to get that bonus bet. QB needs Dylan Rizk or Ja'Cory Brown. Which way will Scott Frost go? Can he work with Dylan Rizk? Does Ja'Cory Brown maybe fit what Scott Frost wants to do? Or is the guy in the portal? What is UCF going to do at quarterback? Andrew, what do you see here? I thought that Dylan Rizk showed a lot of promise and might be somebody that Scott Frost can work with.
He could definitely work with him, but he's definitely not ready. You saw flashes, but as the season wore on and more film was picked up, he started to struggle more and more. This is a great guy for Mackenzie Milton to work with. There's a lot of parallels. Not a huge guy, but very scrappy, can tuck the ball and run when he needs to, but can make some very sharp throws. He just needs to build on that confidence, build on that vision. And I think Milton is a perfect guy for that. For this year, I expect the next year starter to come from the transfer portal. I don't think Rizk is going to be the guy. I think they're going to try to hold him back for a year to kind of learn under, with not only just Frost, but with Cooper and Milton. This is, Fresno State had Jeff Tedford, who was the quarterback whisperer for many, many years. I think you can build something similar to that in this trio at UCF. You just have to give them a chance at this point. But I think in the short term, they're going to have to plug someone in. So don't be surprised if the starting quarterback is a portal guy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what direction he decides to go. Again, in today's college football, without dynamic quarterback play, it's really, really hard to win games. And we saw that be a primary reason that UCF struggled this year was the inability to find effective and consistent quarterback play at times. So they gave Ja'Cory Brown a shot. In the BYU game, he just kept throwing interceptions and wouldn't stop. So Dylan Rizk got a shot and he led a touchdown drive. And EJ Colson maybe showed that he wasn't ready, but now he's out of here. Look, you need to have at least 4 scholarship quarterbacks, I believe, on the roster. I think in case of break the glass in case of emergency. So they got to go get at least 2 guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, they lost Riley Trujillo to the portal as well. He was the back end. He was that extra guy. This is a very empty, barren cupboard. The good thing is you have a guy. If you can't land anyone through the portal, which I'd be very surprised if they can't. But you have a guy who can at least be plugged in for now, and just take the licks and as you go through that rebuild. But again, I'm not sold that UCF can't find a transfer quarterback in the portal that at least has 1 year of eligibility that wouldn't want to play for Scott Frost and the offense that that they've seen him generate before.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun to watch Scott Frost develop QBs at UCF this go around. It's going to be fun to cover it, and we're going to be back here tomorrow to talk more about it. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on social media, Blue Sky, Twitter, at StatBoyDrew, and you can catch my writing on Last Word on College Football, part of the Last Word on Sports family.
Thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends at the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including UCF. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us back here tomorrow with more Locked On UCF.